The downtown Presbyterian Church is a historical and architectural jewel of Nashville. Let's have a look around.
The downtown Presbyterian Church, my nickname for it is Karnak on the Cumberland because its Egyptian revival brought to Tennessee. This building is the finest extant example of Egyptian revival architecture anywhere. It's recognized by the United States government as a National Historic Landmark because of the history of the building and the architecture. And William Strickland is the reason we have this in Nashville. He had come here in 1845 to design our state capitol building, and while he was here a few years after that, in 1849, the church building that the First Presbyterian was worshiping in burned to the ground. So they needed a new building. One of their members, Adelicia Ackland, who was the wealthiest woman in Tennessee, had just buried her first husband in a mausoleum that she had commissioned at Fairview Plantation. It was the first Egyptian revival building in Tennessee. When they were doing the competition to build this building, William Strickland had submitted a plan that was Italianate. And for some reason, they thought that that Italian Renaissance building just wouldn't work for Protestants. So they rejected that design. It had two square towers, though, and they had large bases and then a smaller square tower on top of that. He liked that idea, and I think what he played with then was another building he designed in Philadelphia, St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. And St. Stephen's had octagonal Gothic towers. Well, if he figured out that Italian was too non-Protestant for them, Gothic probably would have driven them nuts. So what did he do? He made it pagan instead. It was Egyptian. And probably because of Adelicia, they said that's okay because she just paid for an Egyptian-style building. When you walk into this space, you come through two pylon-like entrances that look like temple entrances. As you come down the two aisles, you look out to the sides at these windows which look like desert oases. And you're going through the desert. If you look over your head, you can see openings in the ceiling to the desert sky. There's blue sky with clouds drifting overhead. And you're approaching a great hall of columns at the front. And that is a representation, I believe, of Karnak, one of the largest temples ever erected on the planet, and it was a cult center to Amun-Re, the sun god. And you can see Amun-Re all around the doorways up there. Grand architecture is meant to engender a sense of awe and wonder, and one thing I like to point out to people in this space is what were Jesus's first memories? His parents took him to Egypt as a child, so growing up, his first visual memories would have been things like this, as a child growing up in Egypt. So remember the biblical line in the Old Testament, from out of Egypt I have called my son, which is part of the prophecy that there will be a Messiah that will come. So this is his visual memory, and I think it's a very appropriate space for Christians to gather in. If you look at the baptismal font, for example, they have converted that heathen. They've hit him with holy water, and there's a cross on top of Amun-Ra now, so he's a Christian symbol. And Christians began worshiping in spaces where they'd always worshiped. A lot of them simply continued to worship in temples that had been dedicated to another god by putting their icons on top of the older icons, and suddenly it was a place that they felt comfortable in. They'd always been there, so it's just repurposed.